Hey everyone, it's Blake, and this is the 411 on Wrestling Podcast. Actually was planning on discussing AEW Full Gear a little bit later in the week on our normal weekly episode, but wanted to go ahead and give you a nice little bonus episode here with complete thoughts on AEW Full Gear, given the buzz coming out of that show and what many people, myself included, thought was without question one of AEW's best pay-per-view efforts to date. And quite frankly, could have been their best from top to bottom. So let's jump into it and talk about everything that took place at AEW Full Gear at Daly's Place in Jacksonville. Started off with the buy-in, which you had Serena Deeb versus Allysin Kay, and this was for the NWA Women's Championship, of course. I thought this was something that, of course, you heard us talk about it on the preview episode, that, you know, they were giving the NWA Women's Championship as much of a spotlight as the AEW Women's Championship. And this was another example, I thought, of that, because these two had a great match. Serena Deeb and Allysin Kay, they gave them the time to tell the story. You know, that's a good idea because these two had good chemistry. Again, they gave them plenty of time because it was on the buy-in. They didn't have to necessarily worry about rushing them out there and doing anything, that was going to be of a short nature. Like, they were allowed to work their style, and I thought these two had a great chemistry together. It was the simple type of storytelling, I think, that you get from these kind of matches, and I think it's what Serena Deeb, given her experience, is going to bring to this AEW roster. But of course, as we know, she is the NWA Women's Champion. But I also thought here that Allysin Kay, she is someone that if you're AEW, she just announced her exit from NWA. This is someone I would pick up because I think she would be a very valuable member of the roster. There are obviously others out there that could do the same, which we've talked about before, people like Layla Hirsch, some of the others. I mean, I feel like this would be a good addition, and so I wonder what the next move is for her. Obviously, as we said, just sort of announcing her future with the NWA here recently, and where does she go from here? I thought this was a good showing. If you're Tony Khan, you're trying to improve the women's division. I'm not sure what else you would probably need to see in order to add her to the division because this was a really good match, and that led to the big moment after the match, which was none other than Thunder Rosa coming back and going face-to-face with Serena Deeb, the person she lost her NWA Women's Championship to, and that's that simple storytelling I said earlier. That's the simple stuff. Like, it's very simple. Champion loses their title, challenger wins the title, champion comes back trying to get the title back from the new champion. Like, it's a very simple story, and I think AEW could do a lot more of this with its own women's division because this was pretty much all you needed to know. This got you excited for a future Thunder Rosa versus Serena Deeb rematch for the NWA women's title. But at the same time, if you're AEW, you have Serena Deeb under contract. If you can get someone like Thunder Rosa under contract eventually, then obviously it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, it's going to be a theme of the show, AEW, and Cody has said it many times, Tony Khan said it many times, they're not afraid to work with other companies, and we're seeing that, and we'll have another example of that coming up in the next match. But I thought this was really good on the buy-in, and it gives people an opportunity to see, these are three women that could be main featured attractions on AEW television as part of the women's roster, even if they're working for other companies. And so that's something else, too, where I think AEW with its own talents, and again, we know Serena Deeb's under contract, but with Thunder Rosa, with Allysin Kay, they're featured very well, and I wish they would be able to do that a little bit more with their own talent that are under contract right now. And that's not to knock, Thunder Rosa or Allysin Kay. They deserve it. Like, give Thunder Rosa, I've said it many times, like, give her the belt and let her run with it. But at the same time, I think there are ways that they can improve what they're doing with everything else with their women's division. But as I said, the theme would be that AEW would work with anyone and, have that partnership with other companies. As Cody said, the bridges are down. And that was definitely the case in the next match because we started off the show proper with Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page, and Don Callis, of course, from Impact Wrestling. He was on commentary here, and they even put it on the overlay, Impact Wrestling, Don Callis. Like, this guy is from another company. He's from Impact. And I thought that was a very cool touch because Don Callis, I thought, brought a lot to commentary on this match, of course, given his his nature and relationship with Kenny Omega. I thought it was a cool touch to add him to commentary, a very smart move there, even with a four-man booth, with Excalibur, Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, and Don Callis. I thought it worked. They did a really good job with this match, and the story of this one, as you would expect, was that these two guys just know each other so well in the ring. And I love that sequence, being able to see these guys go after some of these signature moves we've seen from them, but the other knows it's coming and is able to counter it and able to reverse it. Hangman knowing which moves Kenny Omega's going to use, Kenny Omega knowing which moves Hangman's going to go to, because they were tag team partners for so long. They had that history together, and I thought it was such an easy way. Again, storytelling, like it's not that hard. You don't have to complicate it. They did a really good job telling the story here with these two, again, being able to match each other move for move just because they know what's coming. And that was pretty much the theme of this match. Very hard-hitting match. Some great spots along the way. I mean, there's just so many different things that you could point to. This was just an incredible match. And really, for the majority of the night, I thought this was the best match on the card. There may have been one later that topped it, and we'll get to that in a bit. But I thought this was just fantastic, and I don't think you expected anything less. When you saw that this was going to open up the card, I think you knew what you were going to get. When you have a pay-per-view, and again, AEW has only a certain amount of pay-per-views per year, you want to start in a hot fashion, and that's exactly what they did here, and I thought they picked the right match to do it. You knew you were going to get a great one, and you did. Kenny Omega doing the moonsault off the barricade, that was insane. Just so many athletic moves in this match. And again, these two work so well together. They have that chemistry, even though they've been tag team partners for so long. They just have, they have the past, and they have that build behind the story, and they made it work here. I thought just to the best possible way. Like I thought they just really made it work. And now, Kenny Omega gets the win. He's the number one contender. Now what for Hangman? And we'll have a little bit more of a tease with that later on. But Kenny Omega, I think a lot of people from the very start of this tournament thought he was going to win it. Just made more sense, I think, to get to Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley rather than having Hangman Page, because I think there's more story to tell with Hangman moving forward, and I feel like that's what we're going to see here with him losing this match, and with the little tease we're going to have later on with him and his other former fellow friends. John Silver versus Orange Cassidy. I think regular listeners know where my loyalty lies here, but in all seriousness, this was a good match. Like, I think, that's what we say. In AEW, you talk about the variety, and I thought this was the theme of this show, where you go from that match you had from Kenny Omega and Hangman Page to John Silver versus Orange Cassidy. Two guys, personality-wise, that are right there at the top, I think, in AEW. You can certainly argue that these two guys, in terms of their characters, their personalities, like, they're top five. Like, they're right up there, and that's how they've gotten over. And I keep pointing this out, but the thing AEW does so well, to me, they let these guys be themselves, and they let that personality come out. If these guys get over on their own, they're not quick to say, you know what, we're not going to put them, in these top spots because we didn't push them, so therefore we want to do it our way, and we don't really care that they got over organically or the fans decided that they wanted these guys to be in the ring more or have more time on television or pay-per-views or whatever. AEW just rolls with it, and I think these two guys are a perfect example of that. I mean, we knew Orange Cassidy coming into AEW. You knew the backstory, you knew the character was already over, and they haven't really done anything to stifle that. And then with John Silver, who just organically becomes over based on all his hilarious shenanigans that he does on being the Elite, and now with what he's doing in the ring with the Dark Order, it's one of those things where you let it ride, man. You just let these two do their thing, and I thought they did that here. I mean, you had dueling chants for Orange Cassidy and John Silver. I mean, how much better does it get than that? Where you just got, everyone loves these two guys. And so John Silver is also, I think, in the middle of this, not just the personality. I mean, you can laugh at this guy for everything that he does, but he's also found a way to become just the ultimate heel. Like, he does all these heel tactics, of course, tearing Orange Cassidy's pockets. That was a pretty fun spot here, and that's what a heel would do. Like, that's what you go after Orange Cassidy, you go after his pockets on his wardrobe there. And so I just thought these two actually had pretty good chemistry. I didn't really know exactly what we'd get from this match, but you've seen two guys like this evolve from just being comedy type characters to being guys who can actually get in the ring and go with anyone. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, we've already seen it with Orange Cassidy with all the matches he's had, these high-profile championship matches. And now with John Silver, like, I think John Silver is just taking that next step, and I thought this match was it because he was fantastic here. His offense, the strikes, the kicks, like, he's got it, and I think you could put him in there with anyone. These two really impressed, putting them in this spot on pay-per-view. I thought they did a great job here. I just thought this was a good match, and I'd love to see more future matches between John Silver and Orange Cassidy because they've just got the characters that play so well off of each other. Silver just hating everything that Cassidy does, and then Cassidy just sort of, being the laid-back guy who doesn't take Silver's yelling and screaming and antics too seriously. So another, 2 for 2 here because I thought this was a very good match. Then that led us to Cody versus Darby Allin, and if you haven't seen the show yet, spoiler alert, we didn't get Sting, and we kind of teased a little bit about that on the predictions episode of the podcast here with Andy Perez, but no Sting, but that was okay because we still got a pretty good match here between Cody and Darby Allin. The theme of this one I thought was very well done because you had Cody playing up those heel tendencies throughout the match. You had him doing push-ups, you had Arn getting pissed at him for doing push-ups in the middle of this big championship match on pay-per-view. And, at the end of the match, you had Arn even more frustrated at Cody. You could see Arn's frustrations. And, of course, that's because Darby Allin won the TNT title. And he, played up the whole way. Like, you just had Cody almost getting too confident with the fact that he had already beaten this guy multiple times. And he just felt like he was going to find a way to do it again. But that didn't happen, because Darby Allin was the one who just sort of kept going after Cody, even though Cody took control of the match for the large majority of it. It was that situation where, in the end, Cody's cockiness sort of got the best of him. And I think you had Darby Allin, a good showcase here for him as well, being able to play that guy who, while he wasn't the one that was in control of the entire match, he played that sort of underdog type babyface, and that allowed him in the end, to get this opportunity. Just needed that 1 second to be able to counter what Cody was doing, and sort of Cody gets a little bit too cocky, and that allows Darby Allin to get the win. And, one of the big spots everyone was talking about, you had the Avalanche Crossroads from Cody, of course, off the top. That was an insane move. But overall, I picked Darby Allin to win this match. I thought as it went along, I wasn't exactly sure if that was going to be the case, but, I thought they told the story well enough to where it is. Like, they can go back to this match at some point. I don't think we're going to go back to this match right away because afterwards, you had Ricky Starks and Brian Cage come out. They attack Cody and Darby. So naturally, that's going to probably lead to something which, I don't know. Like, you've got 4 guys here that are probably going to be interchanging a bit with Starks, Cage, Cody, and Darby. But I feel like the next thing, of course, I'd love to see Darby Allin versus Ricky Starks. They've been building that up on Dark for a while now. They've been building up that tension between those two. And so I think eventually we're going to get there. Maybe that's the next match. Maybe Revolution. Maybe it is Darby Allin versus Ricky Starks. But it looks like these 4 are going to be involved in each other. And then Will Hobbs, of course, comes out as well with the chair to run these 2 off. So you're going to have a lot of, mixing here with these. And that's what, again, I think AEW does very well is they're able to, tie in multiple guys to one storyline. And they also have multiple storylines going on. It's not necessarily just with one group or one person. And I think that's what you're going to have here. Cody may be in the middle of this a little bit, given the attack from those 2. But also, I'm sure you'll have Cody, with other programs. And Team Taz just trying to wreak havoc. And that's what they're doing right now. So interested to see what we get with this. I assume we probably get a tag team match out of it. I don't know exactly how Will Hobbs is going to factor into the mix. Maybe you add someone else and you do a 6-man. We'll see. But Darby Allin, the new face of TNT, as the TNT champion. So going to be very interested to see where they go from here. And I thought it was one where people talked about, well, maybe don't end Cody's reign. This next reign as quickly. But it was time. Like this big pay-per-view spot on this stacked card. I think if you're going to give Darby Allin his moment, this was it, and now you run with it, and you let this guy, again, be himself, like we talked about with others, and I think he'll run with it and do a really good job. So And then we had the AEW Women's Championship on the line with Hikaru Shida defending her title against Nyla Rose. I said before, I thought the previous match between these two was pretty good. And, so I think they at least made the right call on that going into it, knowing that you have two here that have worked well with each other in the past. Even though, with all the criticism about the women's division, this was probably, one of the best matches you were going to get. And I thought they did a good job because their first match was solid, and I thought this was another solid match. I'll tell you, the one thing that stood out to me was Hikaru Shida. Again, for all the criticism people have of AEW's women's division, I hope it doesn't overshadow the fact that Shida is very, very good. Like, she is such a versatile talent. She has hard-hitting offense, but at the same time, she can sell really well. And I think that ability of her to do both, that's what makes a good wrestler. And so she's very good. And I'm sort of, I picked her to win this match, but I'm sort of glad they kept the title on her because I think you can just do a lot more with that. And that's nothing against Nyla. I just think that you can do a lot more with Shida as champion now, as long as you have people to go after. And, what's the next step with this? Because it seems like, Shida retains the title here, and you have the aftermath of Vicky Guerrero getting mad at Nyla Rose, and so you wonder if there's a split coming there between those two. That would offer a different program, aside from the actual title. And so it feels like, you move to Shida versus who? And I feel like the only choice, at least right now, in terms of where they're at, is probably Britt Baker. And I feel like that's the match you go to now, is Shida versus Britt Baker, and maybe that's what they build for Revolution, because that feels like the next logical step in terms of the next person. Now, again, if that's, assuming they don't sign anyone else or somebody else comes in right away and is someone that challenges right there at the top, you just feel like that's probably the next move. I don't know that they go to Anna Jay or someone like that right now in terms of the heel roster that they have. I don't think they're going to Penelope Ford just yet in that spot. So it just feels like that's the next thing, is Britt Baker is someone who goes after the championship, and maybe she's the one that finally dethrones Shida as champion. But this was good because you just had that story of Nyla focusing on Shida's leg. That plays into Shida not being able to do her usual offense because she does have, the kicks and everything she tries to do with that. So I thought that was a nice little touch, having her work on Shida's leg the entire way. But then, you just have Shida just finding a way to turn it into that next gear, and no pun intended, but she went full gear in this match because, at the end where she's just kicking Nyla and just continues kicking her and then gets the win, like that's that aggressiveness from Shida that I love, and that's what makes her such a good wrestler is, she's able to not only take the beating, but when she wants to turn it on, she can kick the shit out of you, and that's kind of what she did here in this match with Nyla, and that's what allowed her to get the win. So I hope that they continue with Shida. The one thing I would love to see is just continue to add more of that character development. She is your champion. Like, she is your AEW Women's Champion. She's the top person in the AEW Women's Division. Continue adding a bit more of that character to her. Give her some video packages. Give other things rather than just having her get into the ring and not have much of a story behind it. And look, there was a little bit of a story behind this one because they did have the previous history. They had played this up a little bit on AEW Dark. They hadn't really done a lot other than that. And, I think, but you really just, I think if you can just give Shida more opportunity rather than just putting her in the ring every now and then on Dynamite or Dark or whatever, give her some video packages, bring out more of that character, more of that backstory. She's the champion, and you need to treat her as such, and I hope that's what they do, and maybe they'll be able to do more of that as they head into this next feud, which, again, I'm just going to predict is against Britt Baker. Could be against someone else. Don't know exactly, like Abaddon. We know she was out there. Don't know what the injury status is with her, so maybe eventually she comes back and she's in the mix. I don't know, but I just feel like you need to put more time into giving that character development behind Shida because she has been the champion for so long now, and there's so much that you can do with that. So hopefully they do that. But I thought this was a good match. I know some people said they preferred the first one, but I thought this one was pretty good too. And then it was FTR versus the Young Bucks for the AEW Tag Team Championships. And, of course, going in, the stipulation was that if the Young Bucks didn't win, they would never challenge for the titles again. I think a lot of people thought that maybe that put a situation on the match where it seemed like it was predictable. I don't really think that was the case. I thought this was one coming in. If you listen to our previous episode, our predictions episode, I picked FTR here. I thought that this was going to be a situation maybe where with Matt Jackson's injury, maybe take some time off. And I was, they're not going to win the titles and maybe take time off. I felt like that probably wasn't going to be the move, but turns out I was wrong because the Young Bucks do get the win. They will indeed be able to challenge for the tag team titles again because they actually hold them now. I was one of the ones that came into this not really invested into this build to the match at all. I just didn't think it got to that level to where we thought it would for a match like this, one that's years in the making. But it didn't matter once you got into the match because the thing is, the storyline behind the match leading into it doesn't always have to be perfect if the match itself tells the story, and that's what you got here. They told the story in the match. Any of those little things we wanted along the way in the build to it, it didn't matter once the match started because they tied in so much good stuff. All the callbacks, all the different things, like this was pretty much one of the closest things you'll find to a perfect tag team wrestling match. And I said that during it. It's just like this was tag team wrestling, and you would expect that from two of the best tag teams in the world. Just the psychology, the different elements that they added. They told the story. They were able to sell the injuries. They just did so many things well in this match. And again, for the people who say that Young Bucks matches don't have psychology, I would point you towards this match because it had everything you needed. You had, Cash Wheeler going after Matt's knee, Matt selling the knee injury throughout the match. And then, of course, you had Dax Harwood getting the hand injury, and they were wrapping up the hand. It's bleeding everywhere. And then that had the Bucks going after that hand. And so they're both going after each person's weakness in this match. And then, FTR, their constant ability to cut off the ring. You want to talk about popping for something? Like how crazy that sometimes you just pop the fact that these guys are able to cut off the ring the way that they are. And that's the thing, they always bring up on commentary. Jim Ross brings it up all the time. Just about how they always kind of split the ring and keep the guys on their side. It really was. Like, it was all about tag team wrestling. It wasn't just a couple things here or there. The entire match was built around tag team wrestling in terms of the teamwork, in terms of the psychology, everything you need to be a great tag team. And this had it all. Of course, the Bucks using all the tag team finishers, going back, using the different ones. It's sort of the stroll through the past there with those. You get the double sharpshooter, and, the ultimate finish, I think, for a match like this was Matt winning with the super kick after, Cash Wheeler gets a little too excited and goes for a flip of his own, and it doesn't work out well for him. So that was sort of the perfect finish for the match, for the story behind these two. Was the fact that, Cash Wheeler decided, what do we have to do to beat this team? We're going to go to their own playbook, and for all the things we've done about knocking this over the years, we're going to do it anyways, and it cost him, and it was the super kick that got the job done for the Young Bucks. This was just tremendous. I don't know how else to say it. I think probably by the end of the night, this was my favorite match on the card. It was, and again, it's subjective. You can judge that match. Both of them were great matches in terms of Omega versus Page and this match in particular, but I just thought this is one that even on the first watch, like this stood out as one of the best. I mean, tag team matches we've seen in a while. Of course, everybody's going to point to the one at Revolution. I'm not sure. You can try to compare them, I guess. I would maybe still have that Revolution tag match ahead of this one. But either way, I don't think you play comparisons here. I think you just enjoy what you got because this was a fantastic tag team wrestling match. And, it's just one where they did. Even with the disappointment with the build to the match, they delivered, and I don't think you really expected them not to. Like, we knew they were going to deliver a good match, but I thought this was even better maybe than I expected with these two. That led to the story after the match with Kenny Omega coming out to celebrate with the Young Bucks, and you had Hangman Page sort of creeping in the aisle, back there just standing and watching, and clearly not very happy. And, he ultimately doesn't come down. So now I think that adds the next layer to Hangman Page's story. We said that earlier, where this guy loses his shot at the title. He said it in that interview going into it with JR. Well, where do I go from here? Well, now he doesn't have the title. He sees Kenny, or now he doesn't have the title shot. He sees Kenny Omega down there with his best buds, with the Young Bucks, and he's the outsider. He's the guy who's left alone without anything but the beer in his hand. And I think that is going to add another element to this Hangman story, and I think that adds to the eventual chase where, as I've said, Moxley to Omega, Moxley and Omega is the next money match. If Omega wins the title, then you work your way back to Omega versus Page for the title, and then I think that's where eventually you get Hangman Page winning the AEW World Title. But how quickly that happens, how far down the road that is, I don't know. But I think this is the starting point for getting back to that point. You know, this Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page match, this was just the beginning, I think. We've still got a long story to tell with these two because the Hangman sort of, he is like, now where does he go next? Does he snap? What happens here? I think there's a lot of ways you could go with it, and it opens up a lot of question marks moving forward. And a change of pace for the next match, to say the least, the Elite Deletion match. Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara. This is one that I don't think I'm going to be able to properly describe, so I'm not going to spend too much time trying to describe it. It was exactly what you expect from a match at the Hardy compound. It had all the little wrinkles. It had all the little Easter eggs. It had all the fun stuff. Like, again, and this we'll talk about with the variety, and we'll get to that a bit more in the main event. But like, this just adds another element of variety on the show, where you have the great technical wrestling, you have the great tag team wrestling, you have the two personalities with Silver and Cassidy, you've got the backstory of Cody and Darby Allin, you've got more story with Shida and Nyla Rose, and then you have this, which is just a complete change of pace, just complete insanity. Hey, I mean, I thought Matt Hardy was going to win. He won the match, but really it was about more than kind of what you saw here, because you had Private Party, Santana and Ortiz getting involved. You had Matt and Sammy shooting each other with fireworks. And then you had the Hurricane and Gangrel. How about that? Gangrel making his return to big pro wrestling television in 2020. Pretty fantastic. He looked pretty good here, though. I thought Gangrel could get in the ring and mixed it up with anybody. This guy looked like he was in great shape. So that was cool to see Gangrel and the Hurricane in there. They did the callbacks to the other points in the feud between these two, of course, the scary spots and the one where we said we hoped this wasn't going to be an actual wrestling match. And actually, there was a lot more wrestling in this than I thought there would be, and there was a lot more dangerous spots than expected. That led to the finish, of course, where you had the same spots that Matt got knocked out at All Out. And you had Matt spearing Sammy to the floor inside, the garage or whatever it was. And that led to Matt being able to pretty much just destroy Sammy from there. And he used the chair at the end, the concerto style, to hit Sammy in the head. And this was a brutal finish. I mean, this was pretty just brutal. And then you had Matt putting him in a trash can and then sending him off with Senor Benjamin. But man, this felt like another different character point for Matt Hardy, because he almost turned into this just maniacal, psychotic type of guy here in the way that he just destroyed Sammy at the end. So now I think it's, what do you do with Sammy in terms of where does he go from here? Obviously, I think after something like this, even though it was in this setting at the Hardy compound, you probably leave him off TV for a little bit. Don't know exactly. I wouldn't expect him just to come waltzing back out on Dynamite on Wednesday night. Could be wrong. But I thought this was, this was different. But it's and again, too, this probably, for some people, probably not their taste. But if you just enjoy it for what it is, it's not going to be a straight wrestling match. There's going to be a lot of wackiness involved. I thought this was really good. And again, tied in the other points in the feud they've already had between these two. So now we see where both of them go. I mean, this Matt Hardy character, what do you get out of it? And then with Sammy, as I said, I've said before, I think Sammy's a future star babyface. I don't think that's going to happen right away because he's got the Inner Circle stuff going on. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with those two. Speaking of the Inner Circle, it has a new member now because MJF is in the group. And I think most people expected that, because that just adds to the tension to where do things go from here. Because now that he's in there, where do things go? Where do you have that tension each and every week? You're going to have something that in the back of your mind, you're going to be thinking, is this where MJF turns? Or is this where Jericho or someone else or Sammy or Santana or Ortiz or Wardlow or Jake Hager? Like, there's so many different ways you can go with this. So I thought this was the most logical direction, was to have MJF win this match, and he did. And the cool touch to start, where MJF comes out with the light up jacket for his entrance, so playing homage to Jericho there. And then MJF would do the same with another wrestling legend in the finish here, as you had the awesome and I thought perfect finish with MJF pulling the Eddie Guerrero special, where he acts like he gets hit with the bat by Jericho, and he falls to the mat while the referee turns around and sees Jericho with the bat, and then MJF rolls him up to get the win. I thought it was just a great finish, just a perfect finish given these two, where you have MJF basically saying, I will do anything to get into this group. And, just two heels. And I think having both of them kind of play that up during this match, and as pointed out by commentary, by the way, Chris Jericho hitting a Frankensteiner, knowing that he's about to turn 50, that's pretty insane, because he did it pretty cleanly. And just MJF doing anything he could to win the match, and we saw that with the finish. I don't know that necessarily this was the match that probably, I don't think it was on the level of a lot of the other matches on the show, but I think it was more about the story anyways. I don't think we expected a 5-star spectacle from MJF and Chris Jericho given the story. I just think you had two heels going up against each other. Those are always weird dynamics, but the story itself sold this match. And now, as I said, I think it sold this match, but it also sells you on the story moving forward, because you have a lot more options in terms of match possibilities with where you can go with the story with MJF in the inner circle. And, does he eventually become the leader? Does we go from here? Like, where do you go? And I think that's something, too, where, you're not really exactly sure. And so that's going to lead you to tune in and be curious about where they do go from here. And then it was the main event. Jon Moxley, Eddie Kingston, AEW World Championship, I Quit match. Wow, I don't even know where you start with this one, because we knew it was going to be destruction. I said going in, this is going to be glorious destruction between these two. They're going to try to rip each other apart, and they did, to say the least. This was brutal. This was violent. These two literally just trying to completely annihilate the other. And neither one would back down. Spot after spot after spot, with the thumbtacks, with the barbed wire, with Eddie Kingston pouring alcohol onto Jon Moxley's back after he had about 100 thumbtacks in it, and he's bleeding everywhere. Just insane. But again, this was what you expected from these two. We did not go in thinking they were going to have a wrestling match for the AEW World Title. You knew it was going to be a full-on aggression, and these two were going to go at it and not let up. And that's exactly what they did. This was just incredible. I thought this was just an unbelievable display of just pure brutality. And that's what it said with the variety. This was the main event on the show, where you had some of these technical wrestling matches with Omega Page, FTR and the Young Bucks, but then you had this as the main event. This was another different change of pace, because these two just tore each other apart. And then at the end, of course, Eddie Kingston, he says, I quit. It's very low. You can barely hear it. You could see Eddie Kingston maybe coming back and disputing this again. But either way, I think this gives you opportunity moving forward with Eddie Kingston. I mean, he's already sold himself as a main event player, given what he's done with the promo work and the build to this match. So he's a top guy moving forward. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And now, of course, Omega comes out at the end. It sets up Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley for the AEW World Title, and that's your next big match. And I think it's where we thought that it was going to get to. And a lot of people say, well, it's too predictable. I don't agree with that, because I think it was predictable for a reason. It was because it was the one that made the most sense when you go back a year ago. And Kenny Omega's had that tweet pinned to the top of his Twitter profile since that point 1 year ago at Full Gear, is that, basically Moxley didn't kill him, and that he was going to come back and basically make him pay for it. And here we are, a year later, we're back to this point. And that's the type of long-term storytelling that I am all in on. I am. I love that kind of stuff. And now this is what you do. You work towards Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley, and it's going to be great. And I thought this pay-per-view, again, top to bottom, I would probably have to go back, I guess, and watch some of the others just to compare. But I think this was the best pay-per-view AEW's done to this point, because I just think every match had a purpose, every match, even though some maybe didn't have the stories of others, they had some type of story tied into it, whether that was in the build, whether that was in the actual match itself. I thought it was just everyone delivered, and it was just a great wrestling show, and would highly recommend. Go back and watch it if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Maybe you're just catching up with this review. Would definitely go back and watch this. It was great, and again, just what an effort. And man, you had a lot of good matches on this show, and it also adds in the fact that you don't really know where some of this stuff is going, and that makes you want to tune in for the next part. Because remember, we had some guys on this show that weren't even factored into the mix. Like Lance Archer had a promo with Jake on the show, but like Lance Archer, what's he going to do next? Like he's talked about going after Eddie Kingston or Jon Moxley. What's the next move for him? And you've got those same questions, with Team Taz now, with Cody and Darby Allin and Will Hobbs, Hangman. You've got so many different ways you can go. What's FTR going to do now that they've lost the titles? What's their response? What's next for them? Who's going to be the top challengers for the Young Bucks? Like, there's so many different questions coming out of the show, and I think that's why you get invested after a show like this, because AEW, people talk about predictability and all that. Maybe in a certain sense, the story goes in a predictable direction, but you don't really always know how it's going to get there. And I think that is what you try to figure out along the way. And there's a lot of questions coming out of this pay-per-view. And again, fantastic showing. Just thought it was a great pay-per-view, and definitely want to check out if you haven't already. But again, be sure to check out all of our coverage from AEW Full Gear over at 411mania.com. Tony Acero, he has his full review. Of course, he did the live coverage. You can check out his review over on the site on there. And as we continue to say, we'll have the link to the GoFundMe for Larry Zonka's family in the show notes. Continue to share that if you can. And again, subscribe to the podcast. Any podcast app you use, just search for 411 on wrestling. That way you subscribe and get all these podcasts sent to you when they go up. And for everything else, you can follow me on Twitter at WrestleBlake. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you next time here on 411 on Wrestling Podcast.